Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Unity Tactical Fast Mount. The Unity Tactical Fast Mount is a one mount or one footprint solution primarily for what's known as passive aiming, which is using night vision devices and being able to aim without using the laser. For a number of reasons, that might be something that's preferential just based on the environment, or maybe, you know, for law enforcement, or probably more specifically military concerns. If your bad guys have night vision too, using your laser device, your LA5, your PEC-15, your MAL, whatever, may give away literally your position, because laser beams, you know, they work like a tracer. So being able to passively aim, which means being able to get a traditional shoulder mount while wearing your night vision looking through the optic, can be beneficial for a number of reasons. Because of the cumbersome, relatively speaking, nature of night vision devices, passive aiming has always been problematic because of the night vision height, or I should say the optic height, really. Just based on where the night vision is and how far it extends off the face, that can be a problem as well, but it also forces you to use a less than ideal shoulder mount position if you're going to get that third point of contact. And this has been something that's been problematic for a very long time. There have been some solutions in the past. The general idea is to bring the optic up a little bit or increase the size of the ocular lens. Optics such as the Trijicon MRO, they have a slightly larger optical lens, so they do lend themselves a little bit better to night vision shooting. If you're not a Trijicon guy, or if you're just an aim point person, you prefer aim points for battery life and for durability and for longevity, and just because their solid reputation is a good quality optic, a higher optic mount is going to be your best solution to be able to give you a more traditional shooting position. So the Unity came out with the Fast. The Fast is a little bit taller than some of the other mounts that are on the market, and that could potentially, at least at first impression, be like, you know what, that's too tall, that's not something I'm into. But here's the thing. The height of the optic mount is not just beneficial for night vision shooting, although that is its primary use. Another great benefit of the taller optic body is it puts your body and your spine in a more natural shooting position, which is something Unity talks about, and something a lot of people have known for a very long time. It gives you more of a chin versus a cheek weld. You're not as likely to turtle up, and it helps the rifle clear and work around plate carriers and body armor and other gear much more efficiently than like a true co-witness or a lower 1/3. Now, getting right into the features of the Unity Tactical Fast, we're talking specifically at the mount right now, but I will also talk about their full Decenter magnifier mount. You're looking at a height of 2.26 inches, which is, like I said, generally taller than some of the other high optic mounts that are kind of geared towards that passive aiming idea, that passive aiming use. It's 70-75 aluminum, which is what I would expect from an optic mount. I mean, you can get away with a different grade of aluminum, but I think 70-75 is probably a better choice. But even then, the weight's not substantially more than what you'd expect from a comparable footprint mount. It comes with a rail grabber system, which is kind of like, you know, you just direct screw it in. But you can also add a quick throw to it if you want to. You can purchase that separately off the Unity site, or whoever, you know, sells the Unity Fast Mount is probably going to carry that option as well. So then you have a quick release throw lever if that's something you need. Another really cool feature about it is the fact that it has, if you want to use them, built-in backup iron sights that are actually worked into the mount there just below the optic window. So if for whatever reason your optic goes down, which with an aim point it can happen, but probably not, especially if you're maintaining good maintenance on the optic. But now you have backup sights. Now the sights can be used in one of two ways. You can use the front sight post and the rear peep that are included, or you can use the rear only and then introduce a front sight post into your rifle setup. You can kind of go either way with it. Because optics have gotten much more reliable, some people are foregoing backup iron sights, because on a night vision gun you've got a red dot, you've got a visible laser, and you've got an IR laser. Those are three methods of aiming. And then you've got backup iron sights, which gives you a fourth method of aiming. It starts to really get redundant department redundancy department there. And that's something that we're probably going to argue about till the end of time. Now, the caveat to using the front sight post and the rear sight that's built into the optic mount itself is they're backup sights with a very, very short sight radius. Probably a shorter sight radius than you'd see on, well, any firearm, not even a rifle, but even handguns. It's a really short sight radius, which makes for some really interesting adjustments. And I found that zeroing it was slightly problematic, but still doable. But keeping in mind they are backup sights. So I was still able to shoot respectable groups even with that extremely short sight radius. Now once I introduced a front sight post, I took the front sight post out of the mount to get it out of the way, and then I used a leaf out front in front of my my PEC 15. Things cleaned up very, very well, and it gave me a more traditional grouping that what I would expect from iron sights at backup sight distances. Do you need backup iron sights on your gun? I think that's a personal question. I think that's a real estate driven question. If I'm using an extremely short firearm like a submachine gun or something like that, and I literally don't have room and something has to take priority and the gun's primary use is night vision, then the iron sights are probably going to be the first thing that gets voted off the island. So having the option to have iron sights built into the optic for backup sight purposes, being able to get respectable A to B zone hits out to 15, 20, 25, I consider that to be a great value even if you don't necessarily use that system. You can also take that front sight post out super easy and introduce a traditional folding front sight or fixed front sight if that's something that you want to do. Talking specifically about the Magnifier mount, granted this review is about the actual optic mount, but I think it's worth mentioning that their Magnifier mount is super awesome. The coolest feature about it is the fact that it folds to center. It doesn't fold to the left, it doesn't fold to the right. My biggest complaint with Magnifier mounts in the past have been they can get in the way. Generally, it makes more sense to have them fold to the outboard. So if I'm a left-handed or a right-handed shooter, I want it to fold to the right. If I'm a left-handed shooter, I want it to fold to the left. So the gun can still be a little bit more maneuverable, but then that increases snag hazard, and I've had my sling getting tangled up in it and things like that. So because of the optic height, I'm able to actually just fold it right to the center. So that's what I get. That's really cool. That gets it just below my my sight picture. And if I need it, I can reach up and put it right back into my my use. I may have to change my cheek weld just a little bit based on the eye relief for the Magnifier, but it gives me a much more intuitive and I would consider to be faster and more streamlined, more ergonomic, if you will, access to a Magnifier than what some of the other mounts have provided in the past. That doesn't mean I don't like fold to side, but if I can get fold to center because the optic mount allows it based on height, then I'm probably going to choose that every single time. Of course, one thing worth mentioning with the fold to center mount is when it's on the gun, you can't use your backup iron sights. So even if it's folded down, I'm not able to get a sight picture in there and use my backup irons. Not really a big deal. Especially because the fold to center mount ships with a quick release throw. So worst case scenario, optic's gone down, I got my Magnifier in my way, I can strip it off the gun pretty easily and then go back to using my iron sights. So it's not a big deal, but I feel like it's worth mentioning because it might be something that people are going to bring up. Now, using the Magnifier mount, the fold to center mount throughout the review process, wearing night vision, just shooting during the day, it was never in the way. I never noticed it. I did have a little bit slight concern about it with using night vision. One of the reasons that I mount my red dots so far forward, one reason is peripheral vision, another reason is to clear night vision devices. Coming from the legacy of using the PVS 14, with like a bayonet mount, which didn't have as much adjustability as some of the modern mounts do. Now I use PVS 15s, but still I like it up here. So putting my Magnifier back here, I was concerned with, okay, even folded down, is my night vision device going to bump into it, knock into it? Am I going to have any issues with that? And I was surprised, not really surprised. I'm pretty sure Unity put a lot of thought into that because they knew the end user was going to be using night vision. Didn't have any interaction with it at all. Still able to get my dot, still able to shoot with a traditional chin weld while using night vision. It is worth mentioning that any advantage something gives you may give you a possible or unforeseen disadvantage, or go against maybe what you're most experienced with or most used to. The mechanical offset, because the optic height is higher, is something that has to be taken into account. My height over bore axis has changed potentially dramatically for depending on what sight you're using. I'm more of a lower 1/3. I always liked a taller mount. Now 193 or 2.26 is something that I'm really a big fan of. Because mainly for me, because I shoot a lot of night vision. I still have and use lower 1/3, but any night vision gun is probably going to get a 193 or Unity fast. Because of that additional height over bore axis, my holdovers do change. Now, using a 50/200 zero, which my zeroing process, I get it on paper and I get it nice and tight at 50, and then I put it on a usually a 6-inch plate at 200 and make any final adjustments. So I'm actually using a 50/200 zero. Holdovers are noticeable, more noticeable than what I've seen with actual absolute co-witness or lower 1/3. So it's something that you're definitely going to have to work into your training. Just showing you some of those I wouldn't say discrepancies, some of those point of aim, point of impact variances here Point of aim was the black dot as notified, POA, and those are the distances notified, or I should say notated, as I was moving back at those distances. Most extreme, of course, is right up close at 3 meters, or well, yards. I did this in yards because everybody prefers yards for some reason. Working my way back to 25, and you can see that it stays in the same neighborhood for quite a long time. That's something that I actually kind of prefer because that gives me a more reliable holdover for distances. Now, with any optic mount, you know, you should know your holdovers. Some people might be like, okay, that's pretty extreme, and if you're coming from a true co-witness or even a lower 1/3, yeah, that is a little bit more variance, point of aim, point of impact, but it's something that's completely manageable. And if you have a use for night vision, or if you own night vision, you want to shoot night vision and you want to do passive aiming, this is going to be one of the best options out there for you to do passive aiming. So it might be something that you just have to get used to. And of course, if you're going to put the time in and invest the time and the money in night vision and shooting, then you should probably, you know, make adjustments to your hard programmed holdovers coming from a true co-witness or a lower 1/3. So I wanted to get a lot of time on the Unity Fast before I made a video. My traditional review process is 2,000 rounds. I actually went over that this time just because of the overlap and timing and based on some other things I was doing, classes I was teaching, so on and so forth. So I've actually got around 2,400 rounds on it, which isn't significantly more than my traditional review process, but I think it gives me a little bit more time with it to have a little bit more refined opinion. I don't like doing initial impression reviews. I like to actually spend some time with something before I render opinion. I was very excited about the Unity mount when I first saw it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was going to be something that was going to work for me. Spending a lot of time with it, a lot of night vision, low light, and of course daylight shooting, because the optic mount has to work in all environments. Otherwise, it's going to be a very niche object that's going to be on a very specific rifle, and I like my rifles to be able to work in day, low light, and night vision conditions if they're going to be set up also as a night vision gun. I'd hate to use something that only worked in night vision situations, especially for a general use carbine. Once you get used to the different weld on the rifle, the different mounting, sometimes referred to as a chin weld, which is, to me, I get to stand up straighter. I'm not as likely to turtle up. That's been beneficial. I'd already kind of experienced it a little bit using a 193 height mount, but the Unity mount being taller really forces you to. Well, I mean, you can use it by turtling up, but it's going to be problematic. You're probably going to introduce alignment parallax into your sight picture, but it's not an issue. It's something that I actually found that I started to prefer, and now I feel weird when I shoot. Sometimes I feel weird when I shoot a lower 1/3. I don't have any true co-witness mounts. That's just too short for me. I feel like I really turtle into those, and I don't like them very much. But using the Unity mount, even in traditional shooting positions, working barricades, shooting from the prone, nothing was an issue. I didn't find that I had to strain or work my neck in an unnatural way in order to acquire my optic. In fact, quite the opposite. And if you work in an occupation where you might have to use a gas mask, you definitely need a taller mount, which you probably already know, to be able to get on that gun and use it comfortably. So if you're going to be using night vision, if you're going to work in chemical environments where you got to wear a gas mask, or if you just want a more natural shooting position because you feel like you tactical Timmy really, really hard, like some of us have been prone to do, this mount is going to put your head in a more natural position, so it's not like I have to do anything differently. I just have to get out of the habit that I may have developed to unnaturally position my neck to shoot a rifle, whereas the Unity Fast mount and the taller mounts in general, we actually use a more natural position. So we're getting back to a little bit more of that physiological homeostasis that we want to be a little bit more effective when it comes to shooting, not just in night vision, but in any lighting condition. Final verdict. And I use final with an asterisk because I'm going to continue using it. If I identify a problem with it in the future, I'll be sure to mention that, although I don't really expect to. But final verdict on the Unity Fast, it's a system. You can just get the optic mount, but I highly recommend, especially if you already use magnifiers, that you grab the full decenter mount as well. Price point is totally reasonable, comparable to a lot of the other mounts that are out there. It doesn't add a lot of weight, but you get a whole lot of value out of it. If you use night vision, you absolutely have to have one. I like the fact that it wasn't just a 193 height mount to make one because everyone else was. A lot more thought went into the design of this, and it actually ended up raising it up because they probably found during the design process that 193 is great. That seems to become the standard for that next level up above a lower 1/3. But we can go a little taller and give people more natural shooting position, a little bit more maneuverability when it comes to using night vision or, you know, gas masks or whatever is causing you to have those issues. And it just puts the neck in a more neutral position. So if you shoot night vision, or if, like I said, you occupationally have worries about having to use a gas mask SWAT or something like that, I would definitely recommend that you take a hard look and consider getting one of these mounts. If you just want to, I don't know, develop more natural shooting, it's definitely an advantage as well. People are apprehensive about the taller mounts because they're different. But keep in mind that a lot of our optic mount heights came from a graduated rifle stock. So if you think about traditional rifles to where the cheek weld sat lower than the bore axis, you think about your old M14s and M1 Garands and pretty much any rifle prior to the AR and that uninterrupted buffer tube interface that we got, you think about where your cheek weld would sit in relation to the optics on those rifles. This is getting back to that a little bit more natural position. So it's something that's definitely going to be more beneficial for any type of shooter, not just somebody who's using night vision or gas masks or some kind of occupational concern like that. So it's definitely something worth looking at. I really couldn't find anything bad about the Unity. Bad, what I mean bad is things that I didn't like or things that were factually an issue with the design. Overall, I've been very, very impressed with it, and I'm going to continue to use it. It's probably the most intuitive optic mount height-wise that I've used for night vision purposes, and having those built-in backup sights, even if I don't use the optional front sight inside the mount itself, I can still use a front sight post. I think that's definitely an added benefit to the mount, because generally the taller optic mounts preclude the use of iron sights because they block a traditional iron sight height sight picture. So you've got to go to a 45 offset optic, or you've got to go to 45 offset iron sights. I can still just look up, look down. It's like kind of like the reverse of the old Elcan system where the irons were on top and you had the Elcan optic. So if your Elcan went down or you were zoomed in too much, you just pop your head up and use the top irons. They are backup sights, but if you take that front sight post out and use a traditional front sight post, you definitely gain that refined ability for sight alignment back. So I guess my final verdict is it's awesome, and if you shoot night vision, get one. I'm Aaron Calvin with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.